Hi, everyone. Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us for today's session of the Build Breakdown. We're diving into unlocking efficiency with Autodesk Build and Cost Management. I'm Bree. I'm the marketing manager at Topcon Solutions, and I'll be keeping things moving behind the scenes and making sure your questions get answered today. So why we're here. Construction is moving faster than ever. I think we all know that. We see that. It's in the news. There's tighter margins, labor shortages, rising costs, and teams just like yours are constantly asked to do more with less. So today's panel will explore how Autodesk Build and Cost Management helps AEC teams streamline workflows, gain better cost control, and simplify processes. So how this works. This is a live discussion, so drop your questions in the chat anytime, and I'll bring them into the conversation when the timing is right. We'll also have a dedicated Q&A time at the end of the webinar. So, all right, let's get started. I'm going to hand it over to Dave.
All right, thank you so much, Bree, and thank you everyone for joining us. As Bree stated, today we are really diving into unlocking efficiencies in Autodesk Build, Cost Management. We're going to talk about a few different aspects of how we can unlock different efficiencies in this platform and really utilizing a digitized, construction management or project management platform. So I brought with me a fantastic crew. I plan on introducing them here in a second, but let's dive into the agenda of today. So today we're going to do a brief kind of welcome and introductions, and then we'll navigate over to the evolution of construction workflows. We'll talk about some real world applications of Autodesk Build and Cost Management, and we'll dive into some best practices for implementing Build and Cost Management, and of course, open it up for a Q&A. So as we're going through this presentation, if you guys have any questions at any point in time, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll try and address them as we get them. All right, so let's dive into it. I'm David Campbell. I'm a lead application specialist with Topcon Solutions. I have 7 going on 8 years here at TSS. And I do a lot of our construction kind of workflows, our implementation, support, kind of all the above on all things construction. Now, when I first got into the industry, I kind of started in architecture. I had a real big love for architecture and kind of grew from there as I got into structural MEP and kept moving up into vertical and horizontal construction. A lot of my friends, they tell me that I'm kind of like a mushroom because I'm a fun guy. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to introduce my team that I have here. So with me, I brought a group of different people from different backgrounds, right? Each of us got started in the construction industry a little bit differently. And we've kind of come together at this crossroads in our career where we all, utilize construction technology, right? And we've kind of learned to use it in different ways, right? In different workflows that when we started in the industry to how, we got to where we are. So what I want to do is I'll go ahead and have each one of them introduce themselves. Guys, tell us a little bit about yourselves and kind of, where you are at TSS and maybe a little bit about how you started, and then we'll go ahead and dive in. Let's start with Justin.
Hi, everybody. I've been working with Topcon for a little over 7 months now, and I spent my time in the construction world in the field as an APM on the subcontractor side of things. And so I have a little bit of a different perspective than some of the other guys on the team who came from the general contractor side of the fence. But I also spent time in a corporate role with the task of actually implementing and supporting Autodesk Build. So I'm excited to be here this morning and talking through workflows and processes. And it's funny, I spent the first 10 years of my working life in the manufacturing world where every part and piece has a place and every process is defined. And so when I got into construction, it was a little bit like being in the Wild West. Every job site is different. Even sometimes on a big project, different areas within a job are run different. So the possibilities and the opportunities for Autodesk Build to come in and really keep the train on the track, so to speak, are endless out there. So again, I'm excited to be here and hear everybody else's views as well.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Gruber, and I have about 15 years of construction experience, and that ranges from being a project manager for about 4 years, and then a project engineer before that, and also working installing custom windows and flipping houses. And I've also got a lot of experience implementing construction management softwares, and that's kind of where I really found my love and my passion for teaching people how to use technology to transform their workflows and save time and boost productivity. So I'm also very excited to be chatting with you guys, and yeah, hand it off to Mr. Jarom.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name is Jarom Mann. I have been with Topcon for about 14 months. Prior to being with Topcon, I've had kind of an interesting professional career, but I've been in and out of the construction industry my entire life. I cut my teeth on construction as a little tyke with my dad. He's a custom home builder in Southern California, and as a young kid, I remember going to all of his job sites and trying to find a hammer and nails or a big pile of dirt to climb around on. All the way up to running projects for a boutique hotel company in Southern California, and most recently to owning my own general contracting company. In between there, I also flipped houses like Eric, and I was in real estate for a while and have a master's degree in real estate development. Undergrad in accounting. I did tax work for about 7 years professionally. So I've kind of got an interesting background, but always had a love for construction and been connected to it my whole life. So yeah, that's me.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. So with our introduction, I wanted to introduce you to our team, but I also do want to take a second to introduce anyone who's not aware currently of who we are as Topcon Solutions, or you'll hear me say frequently TSS. As Topcon Solutions, we aim to be a complete solutions provider and a technology partner, whether that is with software, hardware, field supplies, rental for equipment, rentals, 3D model assistance, you kind of name it. Essentially, there's many facets to what TSS, who we are and kind of what we do. One of the biggest things is, again, solutions, right? And that's kind of one of the big reasons we're here today, is to talk about some of the solutions that we support. Today, we're going to focus on Autodesk Build Cost Management. But again, we support a lot of different other workflows, Aptix, DirtLogic, ClearEdge. We have a lot of different ways that we tie the kind of office to the field workflows and kind of make sure that everything is streamlined there. So on that note, we have many different store brick and mortar locations throughout the United States. Now, obviously, we do have people remote kind of spread out throughout the country as well. But in these different locations, you'll find a storefront with equipment, rental supplies, or you'll actually find Autodesk, Bluebeam, Topcon, hardware, kind of software training rooms, classrooms at each one of these locations. So essentially, we also support, training, support, all that kind of stuff in store, but we also do that remotely. So let's go ahead and dive into what we're here to talk about today, right? Where I wanted to start is each of us here have had a different path in construction, right? And we've had the opportunity to see how a lot of the technology or how construction has evolved over time with technology, right? So again, in the beginning of where I got started, I'd say back in 2012, 2013, I really got into architecture. I loved Revit as soon as I saw it. I was instantly there. I actually had a job working for a smaller architecture firm where I was the only one that knew Revit. And essentially, I remember, not only where we were pulling files, because I remember the architect actually needing to VPN into shared locations, but Revit back then, I liked to work on my local, especially if I was doing any renderings, different things like that for the project. But, my path kind of started to change as I started to interact with more trades. I really loved structure. I loved MEP. I worked for a design build firm and started to see everything come together. But at the same time, I really noticed it was, a lot of the same, like each kind of group had their own, or each department had their own silos. All of the data that the field team was working off of was siloed. They'd have their checklists, or they'd have, a notepad that they were writing down RFIs or any questions that they had, we're following up on submittals through emails, trying to connect all the dots. Even back then, I was thinking about carrying around, those paper sheets. I used to, either take a PVC pipe, like a 3 or 4 inch, and then, you could put a cap on the end of it. You could roll your plans up and put them in there. But man, you'd go around with so many of those things. It was nuts trying to keep up with design changes and everything else. But what I want to kind of get into here, guys, is let's take a second to talk about, how you guys got started in the industry. What did you see when you got started?
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, like I had spoken to before, coming from manufacturing, everything is mapped out from start to finish. And when you get to a job site, in theory, everything is also mapped out from start to finish. But you learn real quick that theory doesn't get you very far on a job site. You need information. You need it when you need it, usually yesterday. And you need it to be easy to understand, easy to reply to, easy to basically put together to make a decision on. So some of the things that I noticed whenever I first got into the construction space were it was hard just to track down information. One thing that Autodesk Build really allowed us to do in my situation was get everything put together, everybody on the same page, build out workflows that worked for everybody. And it really made a world of difference in what I was doing at that time and implementing Build and working in the field. So, yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, and I would say that my experience was very similar, but I can remember having RFI logs and submittal logs all living in Excel spreadsheets, and those Excel spreadsheets would live on my desktop or the PM's desktop, and if we forgot to include one of the subs or one of the people that were involved with the project, then that could delay the project. That could cost the team a lot of money. So it was really kind of exciting and innovative when I finally got to experience project management software and seeing all of that information coming together like in one centralized spot, and then everybody having access to that as well. So everything was just siloed and not available. So
yeah, I look back onto my first experience as a project manager working for the boutique hotel company, and when I first started, they threw at me 3 pretty massive hotel remodels, each hotel having anywhere from 50 to 150 rooms. And I remember not having a scope of work, not having a schedule, only a contact with the general contractor running the project. And I spent a lot of time, visiting sites and monitoring work, but I would take pictures, I'd write notes on a piece of paper. But as far as sharing that information, getting it back to my superiors on how projects were coming, like there was no sync except for, in emails. In the construction industry, my dad always makes fun of me because instead of just getting after doing the work, I was always trying to come up with new ways to be more efficient. And in my experience as a general contractor, I was in the age of technology as it was coming out, and I was always very impressed by the new features and the technology and the programs that were available that helped cross collaboration, that helped us be successful. But also, me looking back on my previous experience could have helped me be a better project manager, and maybe even ultimately made my experience there a lot better. And I will probably talk about some of those experiences here in a little bit, but yeah, within the last 6-7 years is when we've really seen the technology for the construction management side of construction really take off and help us be more efficient. I'm excited where this is going.
Yes, sir. Yeah, me too. On that note too, kind of thinking about how everything comes together, right? There's a lot of different workflows. There's a lot of different pieces involved in construction, right? As we start thinking about some of the different, you guys mentioned RFI, submittal logs, managing a lot of different space at one time, managing, different projects, managing personnel, trying to get them in there to really, let's say, like with Justin's example, trying to get someone in to fill out like a daily report, right? Trying to digitize that workflow of tracking time. There's a lot of different pieces that we start to see as you look at, the workflows of construction and overall with the construction cloud, right? Now, when we talk about build, it's going to be the construction cloud, Autodesk Docs, and then of course the BIM portion, right? I'm sorry, the Autodesk Build portion. I said BIM, I'm looking at BIM Collaborate, good Lord. The Autodesk Build portion here. Now, there's a lot of like little pieces in here, but overall, there's a lot of big workflows that, let's talk about that for a second, right? How the evolution of technology has really helped to change or really helped benefit a lot of these workflows, right? So we were talking about earlier, I'm going to pick on Eric for a second. I know I've been going with Justin first here, but I'm going to pick on Eric for a second with RFI and, submittal tracking. Even with new versions of, sheet updates. I remember you and I were talking about kind of walking on site, going outside of a job trailer and feeling overwhelmed by the amount of people coming up to you, like subcontractors or different stakeholders, which we'll dive into here in a minute. But coming up to you, asking questions or trying to figure out, what changed between the last version and this version. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can remember being on site, and the minute I stepped out of the job trailer, the subcontractors would come up to me and just pepper me with questions, like, what drawing set are we on? What is this RFI? Has this one been answered by the architect? This isn't matching up with this. Like the mechanical drawings aren't matching up with the architectural drawings. And I can remember being so overwhelmed and trying to figure out like a system to get these questions answered. And I came to like bring in my notepad, so I would go out there and I would write down the subcontractors' questions in my notepad. And then once I got done walking around the job site, I would go back to the trailer and I would have to sit down with my notebook and write out the RFIs, to the architect to get clarification. And I can remember sitting there thinking to myself, oh shoot, what did the plumber say? I can't remember exactly everything he told me,
It's like Chinese telephone at that point, right?
Exactly. yeah, trying to remember all the details and stuff like that, it was impossible. So having construction management software like Autodesk Build, I can remember, having that and then going outside of the trailer and walking around, and the sub would come up and be like, "Hey, I've got this RFI for you." I would pull out my phone, we would write the RFI together. I would show him, be like, "Okay, does this, answer your question, or is this the question you want to submit to the architect?" He would look it over. We'd hit send, and bada bing, bada boom, there it is, in the architect's hands. Then he gets to answer it. It's just so seamless and much better than my notebook.
Yeah, dude. Well, that's really a great talking point there. We started the webinar, we're going to talk about unlocking efficiencies, right? Of course, the mobile environment, being able to put that data in anyone's hands anywhere. But I feel like that also comes back from like the common data environment as well. And I remember, Justin, you were talking as well, because I know Eric brought it up there in terms of trying to keep all that data together. It was very siloed. And you mentioned that as well, in terms of like trying to keep the plan set, who had the right plan set, right? The one that rules them all, right? But essentially, the common data environment today, I mean, it involving the mobile, especially like Eric kind of mentioned there, being able to put that power in anyone's hands to look at the drawings, to look at, create an RFI right there from their cell phone or their iPad, but also to track the information, the activity that is happening from that as well. Now, go ahead. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we would run through things, in my experience, that the superintendent might print off a drawing and hand it to a foreman, and the foreman would go out with his crew and he would install the work, but he might hold on to that one drawing for a couple weeks. He might not know that a new version had come out, had been published. And then you fast forward to after implementing Build, like Eric said, he had his phone, he had his iPad, he was able to go in right where he was, wherever he was in the project, and see the most up-to-date drawing. If something didn't quite line up the way it should, and of course it never lines up the way it should, he could create an issue right there in the field where he's at. He could take a photo. He was able to tag the superintendent, who needed to know right away. He was able to tag the project manager, who needed to know right away. That triggered RFIs, that triggered all kinds of things in the system through workflows that had been built out and structured. And next thing you know, your project's rocking and rolling because everything is in real time.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to take a second here, because that's a great point too. And as I'm thinking about, workflows themselves, one thing in the system, we're talking about unlocking efficiencies, right? Some of our big efficiencies that we're going to talk about here are going to be project templates, starting to templatize the data that you're putting into the system. So Justin mentioned, forms. We mentioned folder structures, permissions, that's the other efficiency I'm also going to make sure that I harp on, especially for these workflows, is roles, right? The permissions inside of the construction cloud, especially Build, cost management, but also the files portion, docs, right? All of that is built off of permissions. And one of the easiest efficiencies that you guys can unlock today is by utilizing those roles and looking at how you can enable the roles, which workflows and which pieces of the overall platform that they will need to take part in. And then essentially assigning those permissions based on that role and, again, that workflow. Now we're gonna take it a step further here in another slide to talk about the stakeholders, right? But again, two efficiencies as we're talking about this common data environment where everybody can get access to data, everybody has the ability to create data in this environment. We want to really look at standardizing, right? And efficiencies there. Just like Justin mentioned, whether it's tagging, it's locations, the metadata inside of the system that you're going to put into these workflows as well. it's important to think about that as you're standardizing the system, especially again with roles and who's going to interact with it. What do you expect to see? How do you expect to get this out? Because again, handover, all these other pieces, all of this goes into play, especially when you're in the field utilizing this, you know, or if you're back in the office and you're trying to pull it out and hand it over to someone, right? All of this being in one centralized environment is huge, right? But there's also another piece that I want to, you know, obviously, Jarom, as you were kind of mentioning there, you managed a boutique hotel, and you said several floors, right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, all right. So in looking at that, and you know, how I kind of want to, you know, take a second to talk about like change management, the decision recording, but also, you know, what was the handover back in the day, or how did you guys plan the changes? What did you see typically back then with your hotel project?
Yeah, so by the time I came into the project, a lot of the decision making had already been done. And as the owner's rep, I was really just there to make sure that the projects were moving along. And you know, with regard to change orders, we almost took on the role of the general contractor of sorts, and on certain aspects of the project that wasn't included in the original scope. So, you know, I had to come in and go out and manage a bunch of things that the GC wasn't. And so when it came to change orders or RFIs, you know, a lot of that stuff was already pretty well sorted out with our in-house designer and the contractor. So I wasn't super involved with that, unfortunately, but I was involved really heavily, not just with my own projects, but with some of the other projects that other team members were managing. And so, you know, we had I remember in Marina del Rey, had a 300 plus room hotel with, you know, different wings and things like that. And it was a massive project. And we would show up as a team at, you know, the time of turnover, and we would do our punch walk. We've got blue tape in one hand, our cell phones in our pockets, and yellow pad of paper in the other. And so it would, you know, it would take us one floor of one wing almost the entire day to inspect. And we would go around and we'd put our blue tape on every piece of furniture that didn't look just right, on any piece of carpet that wasn't stretched. We'd you know, jump on the beds practically just to make sure they were installed and they're sturdy. I mean, because what my boss said was, you have to test everything because you don't know what's going on behind those doors, and you got to make sure that if somebody's going to break something, that you're gonna, you know, put yourself in their shoes. Like, what are they going to break and how are they going to do it? And then we would take pictures, right? But when I left the hotel that day, I didn't have any place to put any of that stuff except some folder on a drive somewhere. And what my superiors did with that information, I don't know. But I look at Autodesk now, and I look at what the tools that are available, and I look at, you know, like the issues, for instance, and how I could have documented and made an issue for every room, a punch walk, and I could have taken photos and I could have referenced each photo to that one issue, and I could have made notes, and I could have tagged the subcontractor. I could have tagged the contractor, as well as myself and my owner's rep, my higher ups, so that everybody knew exactly what was broken, what needed to be fixed, or what just needed to be touched up on every room. Where that information may have died at the end of the day, I don't know how far it got. It wasn't my responsibility. But had that power been given to me, I could have easily have handed that information off to make sure that before the hotel got turned over, that each one of those issues was handled. And with the way that they're tracked, I could have done my follow up in a week and double check to make sure that all of that stuff was taken care of. So I look at how the tools that are available to me now could have wildly changed my experience in that situation, as well as helped my company make sure that they were getting the product that they were paying for.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And, a big thing I want to kind of start navigating over to based off of that too is really, like you were mentioning, a lot of the stakeholders that were involved there, and how those stakeholders will typically interact with the data, whether it's your photos, it's a report, that you got to print out of what needs to be done with each photo. As you're kind of mentioning there, utilizing issues, that's pretty much a shoe-in for any QA, QC, punch walking kind of workflows, with the ability to reference photos, videos, tag it with locations. Again, kind of going back to what we mentioned earlier, there are going to be several capabilities within this system, and the issues tool in itself can be used so many different ways, from design team to your building team to literally it's so versatile, right? But that's another thing we really need to look at, is when you have all of these different tools and all of these different capabilities and workflows inside of the platform, you essentially, at the end of the day, what you're looking at is aligning the stakeholders to the data that they need in the system. When that's build, that could be, again, your PMs, it could be supers, it could be, just laborers, field personnel, it could be subcontractors, it could be the owner. There's so many different, stakeholders that can be involved on that side, but again, on the cost side as well. And even then on the design side, right? There's so many different stakeholders that get involved. And as we're looking at this huge, it's like a puzzle, right? When you dump a puzzle onto a table and you start going through it, it's a mess at first, and it can kind of feel overwhelming, right? But when you assemble that puzzle in the right way, it can create a beautiful picture. And it's kind of like what we're looking at here, right? And ultimately, our puzzle is really going to end up being the project template, right? Our project template is the puzzle that we're putting together from our projects in the system. What we want to do is, again, start thinking about, the pieces, the workflows, the modules, the tools within build and cost, and getting into those, aligning the stakeholders of that project with roles and permissions, the ability to get in and have access to the level of, need, let's say, right? You don't want subcontractors getting in there and getting into your invoice and being able to edit it. You don't want, certain things. There are stakeholders that you want to align with workflows that they need in the system, right? But again, one of the big things that I want to, as we're talking about the evolution of workflows, Jarom, you mentioned there, you weren't really sure what everybody did with it, but that you put it on a drive, you hope somebody got all that information, right? And a lot of times, I'd imagine that was for one stakeholder, maybe two stakeholders, right? And then you're trying to keep up with, everything there. Let's go ahead and actually, I want to make sure I put a point out there, guys. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to put those in the chat. But Justin, what would you say about stakeholders and having access to all of the data in the system, and how that's changed with technology today?
Well, I agree so much with what you're saying, that all of this data is like a massive puzzle that you're getting out of these projects. But once you build out your templates, and I'm going to use issues as an example here. Let's say you've got a few different types of issues that are built out in your template: safety, quality, rework, whatever that you want them to be. Even though every project's different, the data that you start pulling out of these projects can be uniform, can really help you drive decisions that help the company overall. Hey, do we need to focus on quality? Are we having a lot of rework in one certain area? Are we having safety issues? The value that comes out of building out those templates and having things consistent from project to project is just over the moon.
Completely agree about that. Eric, you had brought up that, in your past life there, you were writing subcontracts and writing up purchase orders and trying to keep track of a lot of, the cost side of things, right? Now, one of the other things I wanted to make sure, because Justin was talking about templates there, and of course, issues is just one of the things that you can look at templatizing. as we look at, the build side, there's a lot of different pieces, but also on the cost side, right? And one thing that a huge efficiency on the cost side that we can look to unlock is really with our document templates. We mentioned project templates, but for cost with document templates, we have the ability, kind of like Justin was talking about there, to make these documents generic, whether it's a subcontract, it's a purchase order, change order to an owner, change order to a subcontractor, supplier, an invoice, your G702, 703, what have you. We have the ability to standardize those documents as templates, right? But essentially fill them out with variables in the system to populate data project over project, no matter what that project data is. We have these variables that we can plug into those and standardize, templatize that really, and standardize the rollout of those and save a ton of time with creating those documents. Eric, again, I know I don't want to pick on you too much, sir, but I know you have some previous history with that, right?
Yeah. So like you were saying, David, with those document templates, you can create those with your company logos, your letterheads, anything like that. And then you put them into the system. And then when you're generating your subcontract, your pay apps, then this nice template comes out that you can send to your subcontractors. You can send to your nice and professional and neat. And it's all tracked within the system too. So you're not just relying on your Excel spreadsheets and your emails and things like that. So yeah, it is a very nice feature.
Yeah, one of my biggest things about it really is some of the time that it saves. I mean, if you think about trying to go back, to writing subcontracts, you're doing it in Word or you have an Excel file, and typically you'll have a template, but that template you got to go through and you still have to manually adjust different variables, the project name, who the subcontractor is, there, of course, what the subcontract value is, different things like that for each one of those that you have on each project, right? And then again, if a subcontractor, let's say you send it out and they have comments, they need to make changes on it, the SOV, they want the scope to change, or there are constant adjustments going back and forth to make that document what it needs to be. And your point there with the central data environment, I feel like is huge too, because not only having the version control to see how that document, has changed from version 1 to version 2 to version, 12, whatever it is, but having that document again in one environment to see, and to guarantee it's the most, up-to-date version of that document. So when you do send it out to get it signed, you have you have every version of that document as it was. Now, of course, we can timestamp it, but typically in ACC and in the files environment, I would recommend just naming it the same. It's going to timestamp itself when it uploads, it version controls it. And again, you can have your signed and you can have your, draft essentially. And I really love the thought of how much time it saves, utilizing, once you unlock these document templates, right? How much time that will save project over project, subcontract over subcontract, in the sheer amount of time that you have to spend manually updating each one of those. I mean, to me, that's a huge efficiency.
One thing to add to that, David, too, was, like you said, version control and formatting as well. I'm sure everybody here has tried to format a Word document and how frustrating that can be. But once you get these document templates built out, then they're done. All you have to do is input the information and it just populates in the system. So that's a huge time saver right there as well.
Yes, it is. Now, as we're kind of going through this, obviously I kind of mentioned there that one of our big efficiencies too is going to be a template, right? Is getting all of this data, whether, aligning the stakeholder with the tools that they can utilize, and then getting to, kind of roll that out in the system. Now, one thing, kind of the next piece I want to make sure I get into here are some real world applications of build and cost management. So each one of us here, has been involved on, different projects. Recently for me, I went into a data center project where they were in the third phase of construction out of 4 phases. And as they were starting up the third phase, they realized they needed to shift off of their siloed systems, and they wanted to adopt Autodesk Build and cost management. So what we ended up doing is we kind of went in as a team, figured out, attended their meetings, things like that, figured out where their pain points were, other than the typical RFIs, submittals, things like that, and pretty much digitize them into and help them implement Autodesk Build. Now, during the, kind of phase where we were helping them to implement, we ended up building and standardizing, several forms and workflows, right? We, again, kind of, as the process that I'm talking to all of you about, it's really what we use there. We thought about the different tools, the different pieces, who are the stakeholders who would get into these different tools, whether it's asset management, QA, QC. In that case, we're going to utilize the files, we're going to utilize issues, we're going to utilize forms, and most likely assets, right? That was a big piece for that site, was being able to connect their asset management kind of QA, QC workflows.
Yeah, and in today's world, David, I just want to add to that. If you're walking through, as an example, a data center, there's no excuse not to be able to walk up to a piece of equipment and pull up every QA/QC form, pull up all that asset information. Where was it ordered from? When was it delivered? Who set it? Who wired it? Who made the connections and terminations? And all of that is available right now on your iPad. I mean, it's incredible.
It really is, man. And at one point you made there, Justin, I want to kind of magnify a little bit, is the data trail, right? Being able to reference all of these items, whether it's a form, it's an issue. I can remember we had equipment shipped to the site. It was missing panels, or torque marks are off, or, bars are missing in electrical equipment. There's many different things that come in when you're having it shipped into site, and we have to inspect it, make sure it's okay. And that's actually what we utilized there was, issues, but we took photos, we, kind of brought the whole thing together through the, kind of to your point there too, even when it was submitted on, when it was ordered, when it was shipped, and, all of that data comes together to form the entire data trail within the project itself. I want to ask, let's say, Jarom, I haven't picked on you here in a minute. What are some of your memories? Because I know you were there with me, and I know you have some also, your GC kind of your GC experience there. But is there anything that sticks out to you specifically as you've been implementing Autodesk Build and cost management with different clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is probably a no-brainer for a lot of people who have had a lot of experience in construction, but when I was a general contractor, I made a lot of mistakes. And the one tool that I think could have significantly helped me as a general contractor was the submittals tool. One instance in particular is I was doing a major exterior remodel, and when I first met with the owner, we had discussed a specific style for this shed roof that was being constructed on the front of the building. And when the roofer and the homeowner met, I wasn't available, so I missed the meeting. And the roofer ordered the material. It was the right color. It was the right style that I thought we had discussed at the beginning. But when it was delivered, I got a call from the owner who was very upset that it was not what she had spec'd with the contractor when they met. And I look at the submittals tool, and I consider that that memory, that situation, that still provides quite a bit of heartburn for me because ultimately I had to tell the owner that, this was something, I wasn't there, so I can't speak to it. I've worked with this roofer for a long time. It's not likely that he made a mistake, but he's human. It could have been. But the reality was that the material we ordered had like an 8-week lead time. And the project had already kind of had some hurdles to overcome, and some, there wasn't time for us to, well, first of all, there was the money. We couldn't really afford to order new material, but also we couldn't wait. It was another 8 weeks, and I had to ultimately tell him, well, we can wait another 8 weeks, but I don't think that's what you want. I think this is what we want. We want to move forward with what we have. And, ultimately it made me look bad, made the subcontractor look bad. And ultimately, I don't know that the homeowner was thrilled in the end with the product. Now, had I used the submittals tool, I could have made the homeowner and the subcontractor both provide the specs and both sign off on the product as it was discussed, which could have avoided all of the heartache along the way.
Yeah, well, that, and if you add like the schedule tool and being able to show, like, if we order this is the effect that it's going to have on your project, versus if we order
Absolutely.
this, then we can have that, that we can have that decision, we can record it, and then move forward. I completely agree.
Yeah. So. And I love that.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I love that. From my experience working with you on the data center, that those submittals tie back to the assets. I know you already talked about it, but I just wanted to hit that home, and that everything ties together in build. You make an RFI, it can connect to a submittal. A submittal can connect to an asset. So when you pull up one piece of information in one part of build, you can easily access the chain of events that occurred to ultimately result in the installation of and completion of a task or a piece of equipment. So,
Yes, sir. Yeah. Now, guys, I know we're starting to kind of run a little short on time, so I'm going to go ahead and move over here so we can talk about some of the best practices. And I know we have a couple questions, so I want to start, kind of talking about those and make sure that we, address some of those as well. One of them is really having to do kind of with this slide, but I'll also go back to one of our other ones here. Some of the best practices for implementing Autodesk Build and cost management. And this kind of helps to go along with, what does a timeline look like for building a good project template? Well, in all reality, what we recommend is, as you're starting to implement build, as you're starting to implement cost, is look at a pilot project. We'll call it a pilot or a sandbox project. And what we want to do is we want to test the configurations in there for stakeholder approval. So this is where we get into and someone else had asked, can we show or talk about some examples of templates and workflows? So in project templates, let's say with the docs module, the docs piece, right? There's going to be a folder structure. That folder structure, much like your SharePoint, much like your OneDrive, your shared drive, has permission settings inside of each folder that will cascade down and allow, project members and stakeholders access to those folders and the files within those documents. Now, kind of going back to how do you align roles in those templates? Well, you have to think about the stakeholders. So if I'm putting in a subcontractor and I want to put them into the system, I want to give them access to some of the files, the drawings and things like that. What I want to do is utilize a subcontractor role. I want to assign that role to permissions on that project folder, right? And then assign, when I bring people into my project, I want to assign them as that role subcontractor. Now, as you're testing that out, again, based on, let's say, the docs, as you move up into issues, there are templates that you can put in place and utilize that in your project template. What do you want the role of subcontractor to do with issues? Do you want them to use issues, RFIs, submittals, the schedule tool? There's all of the different pieces, even in cost, with collaborating on subcontracts, collaborating on costs on subcontractor payment applications, forecasting. There's a lot of different pieces in here that you guys will need to think about how the stakeholders will translate into roles, and how those roles will grant access and to those stakeholders and what they need to see in the system. Once you get that, you templatize it. Now, the timeline can be, honestly, we've seen anywhere between, a few weeks to a month to, honestly, we typically see like 3 to 6 months. But at the same time, it depends on how fast you are and how, I would say quick with construction technology. If you've been using a CM system for a little while, you're going to have a good understanding of, let's say your project folder structure. If you guys have been doing it for a while, you have a typical template that you'll utilize, and the people that will get into it. The thought process here is really to start thinking about them as a role, not just as an individual person, to make it easier to manage and standardize rolling that out. Now, from there, you want to train those users to the template that you have configured. Those roles, you'll bring them in as that role. They'll have the access. That's where you make sure that everybody is good to go. Roll that out, explore any potential integrations. And then as you're growing with that, you want to monitor and optimize your feedback, right? As you're going, if you realize that your projects need a change, a lot of people are making updates to it. That's where we want to monitor and update the project template. So the ultimate goal here is not only creating a project template, but it's monitoring that and updating that throughout time as you grow and as you guys advance and do more construction. Now, I want to make sure that I answer this one too. The example kind of situation of utilizing, let's say, build, like I kind of mentioned here. Let me go back. So what you're doing, and this is kind of goes back to our project template, docs and file management is aligned under files in build, right? Or the construction cloud. That is its own piece. You'll go through there and align roles from your account to, that folder structure to grant those, project members permissions to that, access, or that data in that folder. As we move forward into, you're thinking about workflows in build, because overall build is a big tool. It has a lot of pieces in it, even issues in the way that it can be used, right? As we're implementing, even in the example of issues, how can issues be used for QA, QC? How can they be used for communication during drawing flips or design changes? How can they be used for safety tracking? Those are 3 different workflows that we can use the same tool for, but essentially they're going to have 3 different or more, stakeholders. And I see that as 3 or more roles that will essentially play into a template, right, of how they utilize the issues. Because yes, we could let safety in there and give them the full list of all the issue types that we use. But a lot of times what I see is, one of my mottos is keep it simple, stupid. And I try to simplify it. So if we have safety issues, like templates that we can look at for their types, their issue types, I want to go ahead and assign those issue types to my safety team. And when they get in there and go to create an issue, that's the issue that they create. They don't have to worry about design issues or QA, QC or anything else. We can kind of align that to their template.
And that's automatic. That's built into the template. Every project you create, you don't have the headache of going back and, oh, you know what, I didn't give the safety team the permissions that they need, so I've got to go back and do that now because they're missing all this information. It's automatic. When they get into the project, the first safety issue that comes up, the safety team knows about it. Responsibility is placed with them. They're able to take care of the issue. And that's just on one project. You multiply that if a company has 15 or 20 projects going at a time, the insights you get from that really help you drive your decision making in a positive way.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I completely agree. We had another person reach out here and ask, what does support look like, and how accessible is support for end users? Well, you can reach out at any point in time to support at topconsolutions.com. If you're looking for really any level of support, we can help align you with hardware support, software support. If you're looking for build specifically, we can reach out to you afterwards and kind of set up an engagement to kind of scope out, see what your needs are, what kind of support you need. If it's just questions, we can typically jump on a call with you and go through. I do also have some resources, some scribe documents that we can share with you for configuring build templates, configuring templates for cost, navigating build and cost management. You can typically reach out to us at any point in time, and we can kind of help you guys go through how to, or at least kind of wrap your minds around, right, what the templates are, how to build them, or even just, if you're just getting into build, or if you're looking at document templates, no matter what it is, really we can help align you with the right person to help for what you're looking for. Do we have any other questions?
It doesn't look like it.
All
Anybody?
right.
This is your last chance. Well,
All right.
looks
Well,
like that's a wrap. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I was gonna, no, you're all good. Yeah, I was gonna agree. I think that's a wrap. I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to follow up afterwards. But yeah, again, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
And I just want to jump in and say thank you to our panelists, Dave, for hosting, David, Jarom, Justin, and Eric. We appreciate it. And a big shout out to everybody that joined us today. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some time with us. So, but if you have any follow-up questions, as Dave mentioned, please feel free to reach out to Topcon Solutions. And if you want to dive deeper, we have a whole team waiting anxiously to help you. They're great, as you got to see a bit today. So, and please join our newsletter or follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. We'll be posting future webinars, event updates, and so we welcome you to join along. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time at the next Build Breakdown webinar. Have a great day, all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.